In a vast and beautiful kingdom surrounded by rivers, green valleys, and warm sunlight, there lived a kind king and a gentle queen. Their people loved them deeply. Their palace was always filled with happiness and celebration. Yet, despite having everything, there was one sadness. They had no child. As the years passed, the queen's smile slowly began to fade. She wished she could hold a child of her own. One day, hope finally returned when the queen became pregnant. The entire kingdom rejoiced, and happiness filled the palace once again. But soon, that joy turned into worry. The queen suddenly fell very ill, and her strength began to fade with each passing day. The royal doctors tried every medicine they knew, but nothing seemed to work. Fear began to spread through the palace. At last, an old healer spoke of a rare magical herb hidden deep within a forbidden forest. Herb said to bring life back to the weakest of hearts. With no other hope left, the king sent his men to find it. After days of searching through dark and dangerous paths, they finally found it. They returned with the glowing green plant. They rushed back to the palace to save the queen. The queen was given the herb. Slowly, her strength began to return. Soon, the day arrived, and a beautiful baby girl was born. As the princess grew, it became clear she was no ordinary child. Far away, deep within a dark forest, there lived a sorceress whose beauty was fading with time. One night, she looked into her magical orb, searching for a way to restore her youth. And there she saw the young princess with the glowing golden hair. One stormy night, when the palace was quiet and the kingdom slept, the sorceress came. The wind howled, the sky darkened, and a strange silence fell over the guards. Before anyone could react, she entered the royal chamber, her eyes fixed on the child. With a cruel smile, she took the baby and vanished into the darkness, leaving the palace in shock and heartbreak. Deep within the forest, far from the world, the sorceress raised the child as her own and named her Rapunzel. There, Rapunzel grew up, knowing nothing of her true past or the world beyond the trees. As the years passed, Rapunzel became a kind and curious young girl. But the sorceress filled her mind with fear, telling her that the outside world was dangerous and full of darkness. Whenever the sorceress wished to enter the tower, she would stand below and call out for Rapunzel to let down her hair. Rapunzel would obey, and her long golden braid would fall like a shining robe, allowing the sorceress to climb up. This was the only way in and out, and so Rapunzel remained trapped, her world limited to the small room and the distant sky. One day, a young prince was riding through the forest. When he heard a voice unlike anything he had ever heard before, it was soft, beautiful, and filled with a quiet sadness. Drawn by the sound, he followed it deeper into the forest until he found the tall, strange tower. He searched for a way inside but found none, and so he hid and waited. As evening fell, he saw the sorceress arrive and call for Rapunzel to let down her hair. To his amazement, a long golden braid fell from the window, and the sorceress climbed up and disappeared inside. The prince watched carefully, understanding the secret of the tower. The next day, when the sorceress was gone, the prince stepped forward and called the same words. Believing it was the sorceress, Rapunzel let down her hair. But when the prince climbed up and entered the tower, she was frightened, for she had never seen anyone else before. The prince spoke gently, and slowly, her fear faded. The prince began to visit her every day when the sorceress was away. He told her stories of the outside world, of mountains, rivers, and cities filled with people and laughter. Rapunzel listened with wonder, her heart filled with dreams. Over time, their friendship grew into love, and they began to plan a way for her to escape. Each time the prince came, he brought a piece of silk, and Rapunzel carefully wove it into a strong rope. For the first time, hope filled her heart, and she dreamed of a life beyond the walls. The day they had dreamed about had finally arrived. After secretly weaving silk day after day, the rope was finally complete. Rapunzel's heart was filled with excitement because by sunset, she and the prince would finally leave the lonely tower behind forever. She could hardly stand still as she looked toward the tower window, waiting for the prince to arrive. But unknown to both of them, everything had already changed. Earlier that day, Gothel had discovered their secret. Hidden inside the tower, she sat in silence waiting. Anger and jealousy burned inside her heart as she stared toward the door. This time, she would not allow Rapunzel to escape. Soon, the familiar sound came. Hidden in the shadows, Gothel slowly lifted her head. A cold smile spread across her face. Moments later, the prince climbed into the tower exactly as he always had. But before either of them could speak, a voice suddenly echoed through the room. Slowly, Gothel stepped out from the shadows. The moment Rapunzel saw her, his eyes widened in shock as Gothel walked toward the center of the room with a cold smile. For a moment, silence filled the tower. Rapunzel stood frozen nearby while the finished rope lay beside the bookshelf. "So, you were planning to steal my Rapunzel from me? You thought I would let that happen?" Her voice grew darker with every word. "Never." Before the prince could react, powerful dark magic exploded around the room. Curtains whipped violently through the air as candles flickered wildly. Gothel raised her hand and launched a blast of magic toward him. The prince barely escaped as the attack struck the tower wall behind him. Glass scattered across the floor. Quickly, he moved in front of Rapunzel, trying to protect her. But Gothel's rage had become uncontrollable. She attacked again. This time the blast struck him directly. The prince was thrown violently across the room and crashed against the stone floor. Everything suddenly became silent. Rapunzel screamed and ran toward him. Tears filled her eyes as she dropped beside him and pulled his head into her lap. Looking down at him, she begged him not to leave her while tears rolled endlessly down her face. Then something impossible began to happen. As her tears touched the prince's face, a soft golden light slowly appeared around them. Tiny rays of warmth flowed gently into his wounds, and little by little the injuries began to disappear. Across the room, Gothel stared in horror. Her expression changed instantly. Without realizing it, her eyes repeatedly moved toward Rapunzel's golden hair. Slowly, his eyes opened. Weak but determined, he looked around and noticed a sharp piece of broken glass lying nearby. Then he looked toward Rapunzel, and then toward her glowing hair. In that moment, he finally understood the truth. With trembling hands, he picked up the broken glass and gently cut through Rapunzel's long golden hair. For a moment, time stood still. Then suddenly the glowing golden braid fell to the floor. Instantly, the magic vanished. Rapunzel looked down in shock as her beautiful golden hair slowly changed color. Strand by strand, the glowing gold faded into dark black hair. The remaining hair changed as well until all the magic had disappeared forever. A horrible scream echoed through the tower. Gothel stared in complete horror. "No, no, what have you done?" Her youthful face suddenly began to change. Wrinkles spread across her skin. Her hair turned gray. Her beauty vanished as years and years returned all at once. She desperately stepped backward in panic, screaming wildly. But in her fear, she forgot about the rope lying across the floor. Her foot became tangled. Her eyes widened with terror as she lost balance and stumbled backward toward the window. Silence suddenly covered the forest below the tower. The old woman lay motionless on the ground. The years she had stolen for so long had finally returned. Her magic was gone. And for the very first time, the tower was free. For the first time in her life, Rapunzel looked toward the world outside the tower and realized that she was finally free. Days later, as Rapunzel and the prince traveled through forests and distant lands, strange memories slowly began returning to her. Then one day, they arrived at a kingdom, where the prince discovered an old story about a missing princess who had disappeared many years ago. As he looked at the paintings and listened to the story, he slowly realized the truth. Rapunzel had not simply been taken. She had been stolen from her family. She was the lost princess. When they finally reached the palace, the king and queen could hardly believe their eyes. Years of pain and searching ended in a single moment as they ran toward their daughter and held her tightly once again. Tears filled everyone's eyes as joy finally returned to the kingdom. Soon bells rang across every street, flowers covered the city, and happiness returned once more. Before the entire kingdom, Rapunzel and the prince were married beneath a sky filled with sunlight and celebration.